What's up, Last Things viewers? I thought this would be a good moment to do a history of Extra Life. Extra Life, if you don't know, was my band from 2007 to 2013, and it's just been reunited. The new record's out, Secular Works Volume 2. You can buy it. The link is in the comments below. Some of you have come on board with me just from the YouTube. Some of you know me just from Psalm Zero, and maybe you've heard a little bit about Extra Life. So I'm going to give you a history of the band, and I'm also going to get into sort of the vibes of 2000s Brooklyn, which is this sort of the milieu that Extra Life originally came up through. So Extra Life was born from me leaving the band Z's in 2007, and I was moving from doing instrumental music into really being a singer, coming into my own as a vocalist. And the concept was basically to do all of the hyper-complex chamber type modernist, avant-garde type stuff that Z's was doing, but with vocals and some of this more medieval vibe that I was going for, and it's more guitar-based and more like a rock band, sort of. We were still maintaining this chamber music aspect in that we had music stands, or some of the band did, and I played sitting down. We were still riding that line. I started standing up later. So starting off with kind of like pre-Extra Life stuff, around 2006, I was playing a bunch of solo shows, and I did a little tour opening for Nat Baldwin. I was just doing stuff under the name Extra Life. This stuff was like semi-improvised, but I really only had 3 songs in the set. And it was one of them, the song I'll Burn, ended up on the first Extra Life record, Secular Works Volume 1. And the other 2 songs ended up on an EP. Honestly, I don't really consider that stuff part of the main Extra Life body of work. Actually, I should steer you toward the 2-song EP. It was put out on this cool label called Sockets. There's cello and saxophone and some interesting stuff. If you check out Sockets records on Bandcamp, they've got it there. Also on that solo tour, part of the improvisation was this loose kind of stuff that I was working with that ended up becoming the intro to I Don't See It That Way. Which was kind of the hit off of the first record, Secular Works. Another context that was really big in the brewing of Extra Life was 2006, when I was playing as a sideman in Dirty Projectors for just one tour, and we were opening for Shoo Shoo on that tour. You know, I love Dirty Projectors. I looked up to Dave, you know, not only as a vocalist, but, you know, more even as a composer, and I was a huge Shoo Shoo fan. So this is just really fun for me. I'm already a singer. I'm already writing this vocal music. I'm already kind of an idiosyncratic, slightly weirdo singer, I guess you could say. And then I'm on tour with these weirdo singers who've been doing this more and are, you know, accomplished. And I'm like, this is really sinking in. I'm like, yeah, like this is kind of where I'm headed. One thing I feel like I want to say regarding my time in Dirty Projectors, I got a lot of comparisons to Dave Longstreth when Extra Life first hit. Because of the melisma, and he's one of the few guys that was like doing the super melismatic singing in the sort of indie rock world. I gotta put it out there. I did not get that from Dave, man. I got that from Medieval Music. I promise you, I was already on that vibe. So that was the whole precursor to Extra Life. 2007, I start writing the material that's going to be the first real record, Secular Works. Basically bang that out during that summer. In the fall, we record that record, and it comes out on the Planaria label. So the first lineup of Extra Life that's on that record did not turn out to be the real classic lineup, but I gotta give shout out. We had Ian Antonio on drums. He was the drummer of Z's, and he really brought that classical kind of element to the drum set. Like, he's playing the kit, but the way he's hitting it is like classical drumming. Tony Gedrich on bass. He was part of the classic lineup, actually. He was like the one that stuck around. On viola, we had Karen Waltuk. She was playing with Jim Thirlwell's band at the time. Really amazing violist. And we had Travis LaPlante playing a little bit of saxophone, but playing keyboard. It's crazy he was down to do that at the time. He's a saxophone player. He's the one of the guys in Battle Trance, who are just an incredible saxophone quartet. And so that was the first performing lineup. That record hit, and it was weird the attention it got. Blogs were big, and they were called blogs. Especially in New York, there were like a million of these music blogs. I can't remember the names of any of them, but they really latched on to Extra Life, especially because Dirty Projectors were kind of like blowing up at the time, so I kind of was like riding on those coattails. You know, people sort of accepted this crazy math medieval stuff as part of 2000s indie rock. We kind of shoehorned our way in there. It was sick. And so some lineup changes just because, you know, Ian and Karen weren't really down to tour. At that point, we enlisted Nick Podgorski, who was playing in an amazing Baltimore band called Yukon. I had heard about Nick's drumming from people in New York, so I invited him to be in the band, and he was like commuting from Baltimore to New York. So he learned the set, and he became like the guy for, up until the end of the first phase. All the way to 2012. Nick Podgorski started to bring a new energy because he played the drums like a drummer, not like a classical cat. There's a different vibe there. There's a more unified drum set sound rather than like tom, snare. Both are amazing. The new violinist that replaced Karen was Kaylee Monahan Ward, who was also with the band up until the very end of phase one, and he also plays on the new Reunion record. I met Kaylee through Wesleyan people. I went to Wesleyan, so did he. He's a little younger, so we weren't there at the same time, but he moved to New York, joined Extra Life immediately, and moved into my place, so we were roommates for like 3 years there, I guess. And we were living in Ridgewood, which is now super blown up. Kaylee had a background in country music more than classical, which is crazy. He kind of has his own sound, which you don't hear on the first Secular Works, but you hear on Made Flesh, and you hear on all the live you know, sets from that time. And Tony Gedrich remained on bass. So for a lot of people, this is the classic lineup. Me, Kaylee, Travis, Nick, and Tony.
You've got it in you too subtle, too holy. Press it out in full view. Flex my secret made material. A promise made good, a promise.
Travis had to back out after a little bit, which no blame there. So we did a bunch of touring of the States, 2008. One of the craziest things is basically Tyonde Braxton from Battles. He's my old buddy, and Battles had just blown up. Ty posts on MySpace, because it's 2008. He's like, check out this band Extra Life. Boom. Next day, European booking agents, we want to book you. Primavera Sound Festival, Moors Jazz Festival, Villette Sonic. I mean, just all, just Europe, just like domination. So just to give a sense of where Extra Life was coming from in this sort of 2000s Brooklyn scene and just the 2000s realm of underground music in general, we were really part of this thing that people were calling brutal prog at the time. Weasel Walter coined that term. Extra Life was coming out of that, even though it had like a gothier kind of more melodic and vocal flavor. But these bands like Lightning Bolt and even like The Locust at that time, doing this really complex, technical, but raw, aggressive kind of music with a sort of a modernist, almost academic flavor to it. All right, so beyond the brutal prog thing, we were also specifically part of this Brooklyn 2000s thing. And if I'm gonna really describe how that was happening, I gotta mention Todd P. He went by Todd P. Name's Todd Patrick. Todd was a promoter. He was so central to this whole community, or like several different communities, just as a promoter. He would put on like 4 shows a week, sometimes even a show every night. He had this huge mailing list, and Todd really brought this DIY, sort of smaller town ethic to New York. The kind of indie rock, DIY under the radar type shows that you would see in the culture of like Portland, Oregon, or the Pacific Northwest kind of indie rock scene. In Brooklyn at that time, even though it was like a little bit getting gentrified, there were all these illegal places, or if not illegal, just unconventional spots that Todd would seek out and throw these shows. And it's like it would always be shifting, and he would have this new place, like, oh, the back of this Polish bar, the back of this strip club. Everyone would get paid well, great door split. He'd work the door, low overhead. It was a really awesome time for experimental, noisy, weirdo stuff, and also some not that weirdo stuff, like just sort of indie music. Some of the bands that were really kindred spirits to Extra Life within that scene, I would have to list Little Women, Early Liturgy. They were just starting out. Vaz, Skeletons, who were very, very important. I'll talk about them a little bit more. Big A, Little A, White Suns, USA is a Monster, Parts and Labor, Sightings. There was this band Taliban, who were just like the worst ever, but you just couldn't avoid them. They would just hop on like every bill. Something else that was really important at that time, in addition to Todd P, or in conjunction with Todd P, for Extra Life, around the Secular Works era of like 2007, 8, 9, was the venue, the Silent Barn. This was the original Silent Barn, not the one in Bushwick, but the one in Ridgewood, right on the border. And that started in 2006 and was around until 2011. So Silent Barn was just an amazing DIY venue. It was like 5 blocks from my house in Ridgewood. Extra Life would play there all the time. Todd would put on all these shows there. And that venue was founded and named by this band, Skeletons. Very underrated. Really interesting band. We would play with bands that didn't necessarily sound like us, but had a similar, just sort of uncategorizable like ethic or something. Another place, aside from venues, that was really important to Extra Life and to some other bands in that scene at this time, was there was this house on Bushwick Avenue and Cedar Avenue, where Tony Gedrich lived, and we would always rehearse there when he was in the band. Hunter Hunt Hendricks from Liturgy also lived there for a long time. Ben Greenberg from Uniform. It was kind of one of those like legacy houses where just people in different connected bands kept moving in and out. It was just so nourishing to be like rehearsing super hard in the basement and then come up and like Hunter's coming out in the bathrobe and like people are listening to music and like, you know, just rapping about stuff. Sometimes there are these houses that just have a magical like a positive vortex to them, you know, of creativity and just at a certain place, certain time, you know? So after we tour a bunch on Secular Works for those couple of years, and it's like people in Europe are feeling it, especially the French. The French love this stuff. Next record, we've got 2010, it's Made Flesh is the next record. And that's like, sounds a lot like Secular Works, but we've got Kaylee's more flavorful violin sounds with effects. Travis is on there a little bit on the synths. Tony's still on bass. That record's like, it's a lot more sexual. All this stuff, the new Extra Life is not sexual like this. This stuff was just, it's so like libidinal and just creeped out. That was like a big part of it. Lyrically, that record was influenced a lot by George Bataille and Baudrillard a little bit. There was a lot of Jean Genet and Yukio Mishima and some James Baldwin too. It's like for some reason I was on this vibe with like gay writers. I don't know why that was. It was like this hetero spin on those cats. So much of this stuff around the Made Flesh era was about misogyny, the nature of violence, the nature of power and sexuality, wrestling with this stuff.
I gave you your word and now I want my taste.
And it's just so not where I'm at now. It's good. I'm glad. If we're talking about Made Flesh, this might be a good moment to talk about cringe. People didn't use the word cringe then as a noun. The internet made it a noun in the 2010s, but back then it was still a verb. I think Extra Life was kind of proto-cringe in a way, especially like Head Shrinker, that tune from Made Flesh. You know, we made a video for that.
Fancy lad, how did you blow your inheritance, fancy lad?
We really were going for not just the weirdly sexual vibe, but there's a lot of like class baiting in there, you know, calling people out for being rich kids, calling myself out for being kind of a rich kid. Just stuff that people don't want to hear.
Wet pedaled like a vagina, wet pedaled like a vagina.
I was really into like the idea of ruining stuff, ruining my own work. Like making something that was just so like precious and crafted and careful and technically, you know, this architectural melody, and then just having lyrics that were just like, man, like, why did you say that?
Girl, but you'll live, mama's little mixed up man.
It really was proto-cringe. It was almost like proto-privilege checking, you know, but like in a bad vibe way. I was really into tackiness. I got a lot of that from Shoo Shoo. We did some split singles right after that with acts that you wouldn't expect. Larkin Grimm, the folk singer. The split with Larkin Grimm features a rendition of Your Body's Calling by R. Kelly. It wasn't so much an edgelord thing, but it was a cringe thing for sure. I still stand by that cover. Everyone should check that out. And we did with Parenthetical Girls, who were kind of a Shoo Shoo adjacent twee pop band, just amazing. And one with Nat Baldwin, my homie from Dirty Projectors, who I did the very first Extra Life solo tour with. So then we're getting to 2011. We've got the record Ripped Heart. It's an EP, 4 songs. In a way, this is kind of my favorite of the first, you know, the first run of Extra Life. It's poppier, it's more, trying to be more accessible. It's not accessible, it's totally fucked up, but trying to be more normal, that's when the gems happen, you know? When you take the weirdness and you try to repress it, you tamp it down, and then it just gets, you know, compressed into this diamond. I think the best Extra Life song from the first batch is probably Elegy from that record.
I wanted you and you knew, boy dead, that's what I said, that's what I said. Little words of a child who'd never bled.
There's also a remix album from around that time called Splayed Flesh, came out right after Made Flesh. That had remixes by Justin Broadrick. That time, you got to have a Broadrick remix, right? And Jim Thirlwell and Kaylee Monahan Ward. So 2012, we get to the last record of the first phase of Extra Life. That's Dream Seeds. Dream Seeds was this whole concept record about children and dreams, sort of as a twin concept record. Children as dreams, dreams as children. I was really into Jung at the time. I was going deep on Jung archetypes. Dreams are like the children of your subconscious, and you need to raise them. You need to honor them and raise them to the conscious mind, you know. And children as archetypes within dreams. I was doing a lot of teaching, like classroom teaching at this time, like general music, and I was teaching at a Catholic school, if you can believe that. I was teaching, I was like general music director there. I was just like surrounded by kids. Maybe you don't like really mess with astrology or whatever, you know, but that was definite Saturn returns time. I wrote this stuff in 2009, 10 when I was 29, you know, came out a few years after that. I was having these insane dreams that, and some of them predicted events. Like, it was actually prophetic dreams. I don't claim to be a psychic in general, but things were opening up. It was very, very powerful psychic time for me.
I don't wanna know what I know. No dreams tonight.
At this point, we've kind of reworked the whole identity of the band in a certain way. Tony Gedrich, the bass player, had left at that point. We went forward as a trio. We really threw people for a loop because I switched to synth, playing synth bass and other stuff. And Kaylee was playing guitar now because he's just such a bad motherfucker. He can go from violin to guitar. He had this whole other sound. It's way more like Cocteau Twinsy and reverby. Check out Dream Seeds and you'll see that. Dream Seeds had a very different sound, not just because of switching up the instrumentation, but also there's a different writing process. With this stuff, I didn't like notate every single drum hit and every single, you know, thing that everyone else is playing. Kaylee and Nick really wrote their own parts. So like I wrote the songs, I wrote the, you would say I'm the composer, but at the same time, their parts were like so intricate and added so much to it that you could kind of say it's co-composed. It's funny, just recently the song Righteous Seed from the Dream Seeds record was included on this compilation. They didn't ask me, but it's okay. But they put it on this compilation that was quote unquote unapologetically pro-choice anthems. And it's funny because the song is about abortion from a personal experience. It's technically pro-choice because I'm technically pro-choice, but unapologetic it is not.
But something has died.
I mean, it is like apologizing to God. It's a very ambivalent song, but you know, people don't like the nuance. So yeah, the last phase of Extra Life is like a whole different thing. Some people like that the best. I mean, people, different Extra Life fans have different feelings on what's the best record. For me, it's Ripped Heart. So then it gets to 2012, and I disband the band. It's a complicated thing to try to get in that headspace of where I was with doing that. Even though Extra Life had only been together for like 6 or like 5 years, I felt locked into this thing. I felt like I had created this kind of baggage, and I wanted to leave the baggage. I think some of it was the sense of humor. I just wanted to leave the sense of humor behind. I wanted to leave the cringe behind, and I can kind of see why, you know, because I have left that behind with this reunion like 10 years later. There was something about 2012, man, where something just died in me. Just something, it was like this cold wind just blew through everything, you know? And the scene changed in New York. The old Silent Barn that was so important, you know, in 2011 it got robbed at gunpoint. And it just never really recovered. Like, just they lost all of this gear and stuff. 2012 was like Obama's second term. Everyone's hope was like just crumbling, you know? I feel like that was kind of like the seed of just the worst decade in human history. I formed Psalm Zero. The coke thing started to escalate. I started to roll with Andrew Hawk, who, other guy in Psalm Zero. No regrets on Psalm Zero either. Those are great records. But it was the beginning of a different time, a darker time, And my feeling was I wanted to compartmentalize things a little more. Because Extra Life was this kind of thing where it was like every vibe at once. My classical thing and my rock thing and just everything that I had to offer in one bundle. And I wanted to compartmentalize. I wanted, Psalm Zero, this is my, going to be my rock thing. And then I'm going to do composer stuff under the name Charlie Looker. I wanted to kind of have these two compartments. So the Extra Life farewell show for that first phase was at the very beginning of 2013, and that was at 285 Kent. 285 Kent was a venue run by Todd P. It was a great place to end, that Extra Life at that time. It closed down soon after that. Pitchfork did this little mini documentary on it. It's a good documentary. I would definitely recommend it. I think it a little bit overstates how specifically important 285 Kent was for the city, because that venue did come around a little bit later, and it wasn't really like a long-standing institution. But the closing of 285 Kent really did symbolize this shift in the city when a lot of these venues closed down kind of like all at once. Actually, for years before 285 Kent was converted into a big venue, it was this strange little place called Paris London West Nile, where a bunch of my friends lived in these very cramped quarters, and they'd put on shows there in an even more DIY weirdo capacity. But in any case, there was something perfect about ending Extra Life first phase at 285, which itself was kind of coming at the end of this cultural moment in New York. Death by Audio was a lot more important than 285 Kent. Death by Audio was right around the corner. We played a million shows there. That place got bought out by the Vice people. I had a lot more love for DBA, Even Glasslands was more important than 285 Kent, and it was right near there. I'll tell you, another person in addition to Todd who was really important in the scene at the time was Torsten Meyer. He has a thing called Unartig, which still does a bunch of stuff, and it's like he just films interesting music.
I made you kid, I laid you kid, I'll make you waste. I made you know and know what my
He was at every show filming. And a lot of these clips that I'm playing here are from Torsten, so shout out to him. So as for the reformation of Extra Life, just a couple years ago, COVID, weird times, I moved to LA. It's just seems like 20,000 years since Extra Life. The idea of reuniting Extra Life, it was like such an absurd idea to me that I was like, I want to do the most absurd idea. And I'm so glad I did it. It's like, that's the thing. Sometimes the last thing you want to do is the first thing you want to do, and it just becomes the path. I asked Haley if he wanted to do it. He was pumped about it. He might not tour with us very much, unfortunately, just as, where he's at, but he did so much amazing string arrangement on this record. I asked Nick to come back on drums. He was like, I'm down with it only if the whole aesthetic is completely different and new. And I was like, the whole concept is that the aesthetic is exactly like the beginning of Extra Life. So, he was understandably like, yeah, that's not the vibe. But we enlisted Gilles Chevignet from Belgium, who is just a monster drummer. So we're going to be touring with him over in Europe and in the States. And on bass now, we've got Toby Driver, who you guys probably know. This is the mastermind of KO Dot. And the new record is born and just came out. Secular Works Volume 2. The sequel to the first Secular Works. If you liked the early stuff, you're gonna like this. It's very much a return to the old Extra Life. we'll see the next Extra Life record and the stuff going forward, it'll probably evolve and it'll change, but it's going to change based on where things are right now. One of the things that's exciting to me, but weird and a little bit daunting, but I'm pumped on, is that even though the aesthetic is a total return to Secular Works Volume 1, the world is so different, and just what it means to make this music is just completely different. I mean, being a quote-unquote Brooklyn band, that doesn't exist anymore. Nobody cares. White guys with guitars, you didn't ask for it. You're getting it, though. It's coming to your town, white guys with guitars. But in the 2000s, we wouldn't have said white guys with guitars because everything was just considered transparent. So yeah, I mean, Secular Works Volume 2, it's possible that it's better than Secular Works Volume 1. Some people are already saying that, but I'm kind of amused at the idea that maybe it won't be as good. Maybe it'll be disappointing. I almost kind of like that in a perverse way. It's better. People like it better already. So there it is. I talked quickly. I was trying to cram in all the information to bring you up to speed. That's what Extra Life was. That's what Extra Life is. And it's going to be the path that I'm on, let's say, indefinitely. You know, this isn't just a one-off. There's going to be more records, EPs, all, you know. There's no time like the future. All right, so stay tuned.